The morning started like any other day on planet Carvo 7. 8-year-old Minji sat outside the research camp, drawing pictures in her notebook. Her father Tai Yang worked inside the main tent with the other scientists. They studied plants and animals on this strange red planet. Minji drew the tall purple trees and the orange sky. She liked this planet even though it was far from Earth. The camp sat in a clearing surrounded by thick jungle. Red vines hung from massive trees. Strange birds made clicking sounds in the branches. Minji heard them every day. She was not afraid. Her father told her the camp was safe. He said the security fence would keep dangerous animals away, but her father was wrong. The attack came without warning. Minji heard screaming from inside the camp. She dropped her notebook and stood up. The security fence sparked and fell. Huge black shapes rushed through the broken fence. They moved so fast. Minji could not understand what she saw. Then she saw them clearly. They were giant apes, but these were not like apes from Earth. They stood 3 meters tall. Their fur was black like night. Their arms were thick as tree trunks. Their faces had too many teeth, sharp white teeth that curved like knives. Their eyes glowed yellow in the red light of the jungle. Minji screamed. She tried to run toward the camp, but one of the creatures grabbed her, its hand wrapped completely around her small body. She could not breathe. The creature lifted her off the ground like she weighed nothing. She kicked and screamed, but it did not help. Through her tears, Minji saw the camp being destroyed. The giant apes tore through tents. They knocked over equipment. She heard more screaming. She saw her father running toward her. He shouted her name, but another creature hit him. Taeyang fell to the ground and did not move. "Daddy!" Minji screamed. But the creature holding her turned and ran into the jungle. Everything became a blur of red and black. Branches hit her face. The creature moved through the trees impossibly fast. Other creatures ran beside them. Minji counted at least 8 of them. She tried to remember what her mother Somin taught her before she died. Her mother was a scientist who studied alien animals. She always said to stay calm when meeting new creatures. But Minji could not stay calm. She was too scared. These monsters were going to eat her. She knew it. The creatures ran for a long time. Minji stopped screaming because her throat hurt. She cried quietly instead. The creature holding her made deep rumbling sounds. The other creatures answered with their own sounds. They were talking to each other. Minji realized these were not just animals. They were smart. That made everything worse. Finally, they stopped running. The creature dropped Minji on the ground. She fell hard and scraped her knee. Blood ran down her leg, but she barely noticed. She looked around and felt her heart sink. They were in a canyon. Tall red cliffs rose on all sides. The ground was covered in bones. Thousands of bones. Some were small. Some were huge. All were picked clean. This was a killing place. Minji started shaking. More of the giant apes came out of caves in the canyon walls. They climbed down using their powerful arms. Soon Minji counted more than 30 of them. They formed a circle around her. Each one was bigger and scarier than the last. One creature was the biggest of all. It had scars across its face and chest. One of its eyes was cloudy and dead. But the other eye stared at Minji with terrible intelligence. This was their leader. Minji knew it without being told. The leader walked toward her slowly. Each step shook the ground. Minji wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. The circle of monsters blocked every path. The leader bent down and sniffed her. Its nose was as big as her whole head. It sniffed her hair, her arms, her whole body. The smell of its breath made Minji want to vomit. It smelled like death and rotting meat. The leader made a sound, a deep roar that echoed off the canyon walls. All the other creatures answered. They beat their chests with their fists. The sound was like thunder. They bared their teeth at Minji. They were deciding how to kill her. She was sure of it. Minji clutched her pocket. Inside was a picture of her father and her dead mother. It was her most precious thing. She pulled it out with shaking hands. She looked at her father's face in the picture. Tears fell onto the photograph. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she whispered. "I'm sorry I couldn't run faster." The leader reached toward her with one massive hand. Its claws were as long as knives. Minji closed her eyes. She did not want to see what would happen next. She waited for pain. She waited to die. But then something strange happened. The leader's claw touched her shoulder. It did not hurt. The touch was almost gentle. Minji opened her eyes in surprise. The leader was staring at her with its one good eye. It tilted its head to the side like a confused dog. The other creatures stopped beating their chests. They stopped making noise. The canyon became quiet. All of them were staring at Minji now. But they were not looking at her like food anymore. They were looking at her like she was something else. Something they did not understand. Minji felt something change inside her body. Her fear was still there. But something else was growing too. Something her mother once told her about. Humans had a special ability. When they were in the most danger, their bodies changed. They became stronger, faster, smarter. It was called the survival instinct. Her mother said humans were the best survivors in the universe. Humans did not have claws or sharp teeth. They did not have thick fur or poison. But they had something better. They had the will to live. They had the ability to never give up. Even when everything looked hopeless, Minji felt that will growing inside her now. She was terrified. She was small. She was alone. But she was still alive. And as long as she was alive, she could fight. She looked up at the leader. She was crying, but she did not look away. She stared right into its yellow eye. She did not know why she did this. Her body just knew what to do. The leader stared back. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The other creatures watched in silence. Something was happening. Something that had never happened before on this planet. The leader's nostrils flared. It sniffed Minji again. Then it made a confused sound. It looked at the other creatures. They made confused sounds back. They were communicating, but Minji did not understand their language. What she did not know was that the creatures were smelling something different about her now. Her scent had changed. When humans got scared, their bodies released certain chemicals. But when humans decided to fight, their bodies released different chemicals. The creatures could smell this change. They were predators. They had hunted on many worlds. They knew the smell of prey. Prey smelled like fear and nothing else. But Minji did not smell like prey anymore. She smelled like something dangerous. Something that would fight back. The leader took a step backward. Then another step. The other creatures saw this and became restless. They growled and shifted their weight. They did not understand why their leader was backing away from such a small creature. Minji did not understand either. But she felt it in her bones. Something had changed. The balance of power had shifted. She was still in terrible danger. She was still surrounded by monsters. But she was not helpless prey anymore. She was human. And humans did not give up. Ever. The standoff continued as the red sun moved across the orange sky. Neither side knew what would happen next. But one thing was certain. This was the beginning of something that would change both species forever. Minji gripped her photograph tighter. She thought about her father. She thought about her mother. She thought about surviving. And deep inside her small body, the ancient fire of humanity began to burn. The giant ape leader stood very still. Its name was Kravik, though Minji did not know this yet. Kravik had lived for many seasons. He had fought in countless battles. He had killed creatures from many different worlds. He was the strongest warrior of his people, the Vorax, but he had never met a creature like this small human before. Kravik's one good eye studied Minji carefully. She was so tiny. Her arms were thin. She had no claws. She had no fangs. Her skin looked soft and easy to tear. By all logic, she should be the easiest prey he ever caught. Yet something was wrong. Kravik sniffed the air again. The small creature's scent had changed completely. At first, she smelled like every other prey animal, pure fear. That fear smell usually made Kravik hungry. It told him the prey had given up. It was time to eat, but now this human smelled different. The fear was still there. Kravik could smell it, but mixed with the fear was something else, something sharp and bitter, something that made the hair on his neck stand up. It was the smell of a creature that would fight to its last breath. Kravik had smelled this scent before, but only from other apex predators. He smelled it from the metal-backed hunters of planet Dravos. He smelled it from the flame cats of Helios Prime. He smelled it from other Vorax during the Great Territorial Wars. But never from prey. Never from something so small and weak. The other Vorax in the canyon were confused. They growled and shifted their weight from foot to foot. The younger ones wanted to attack. They could not understand why Kravik was hesitating. The human was right there. One bite would end it. A young Vorax named Thrax stepped forward. He was impatient and stupid. He wanted to prove he was strong. He reached toward Minji with his clawed hand. Kravik roared so loud that dust fell from the canyon walls. Thrax jumped back immediately. All the other Vorax went silent. Kravik's roar was a command. It meant, do not touch the human. Minji heard the roar and felt it in her chest. But she did not run. She could not run. There was nowhere to go. Instead, she did something her body told her to do. She stood up. Her legs shook so hard she almost fell. But she stayed standing. She made herself as tall as she could. She was still tiny compared to the Vorax, but she was not lying on the ground anymore. She was not curled up in a ball. She was standing. The Vorax saw this and became more confused. Prey did not stand up. Prey stayed down. Prey made themselves small. This creature was doing everything wrong. Minji's heart beat so fast she thought it would explode. Her whole body screamed at her to run, but she remembered something her Uncle Junho told her once. He was a park ranger on Earth. He worked in places where wild animals lived. If you meet a predator, he said, never run. Running triggers their hunting instinct. Stand your ground. Make noise. Make yourself big. Show them you are not easy prey. At the time, Minji thought her uncle was just telling stories. Now his words might save her life. She kept staring at Kravik. Eye contact. Her mother Soman taught her that eye contact was important with animals. Looking away meant submission. Looking down meant you were prey. But looking directly at a predator meant you were not afraid to fight. Kravik stared back. In all his years, no prey had ever looked at him like this. His instincts told him to attack. But something deeper, something older in his brain told him to wait. The Vorax had been warriors for generations. They traveled between worlds in ships made by other species. They hired themselves out as hunters and soldiers. They were good at killing. It was all they knew. But long ago, before they became warriors, the Vorax had been different. They had families. They had built things. They had art and music. But centuries of war had made them forget. War was easier than building. Killing was easier than creating. Kravik still remembered bits of the old ways. His grandmother told him stories when he was young. She said the Vorax used to test other creatures before deciding to fight them. They looked for signs of intelligence. They looked for signs of courage. Creatures that showed courage were respected. Even if the Vorax killed them, they died with honor. This small human showed more courage than warriors twice her size. Minji's legs were getting tired from standing. Her knee hurt from where she fell. Blood dried on her skin. But she did not sit down. She kept standing. She kept staring at Kravik. Then she did something even braver. She took one small step forward. The Vorax gasped. The sound was almost funny coming from such huge creatures. They could not believe what they were seeing. The prey was walking toward their leader. Kravik's muscles tensed. Every instinct screamed at him to attack. But he did not move. He watched the tiny human take another step. Then another. Minji did not know why she was walking forward. It was probably the stupidest thing she could do. But her body moved on its own. Some deep part of her brain knew this was important. She had to show these creatures she was not afraid, even if it was a lie, even if she was terrified. She stopped when she was within arm's reach of Kravik. She tilted her head back to look up at his face. He was so tall. She was so small. One swipe of his hand could kill her instantly, but she did not back down. Kravik bent down until his face was level with hers. His breath washed over her. It smelled terrible. Minji's stomach turned, but she did not look away. She stared into his one good eye. For a moment, they were both frozen. Two different species, two different worlds. But somehow they understood each other. Kravik saw something in the human's eyes. Determination, refusal to quit. The same thing that made the Vorax great warriors was in this tiny creature. She would fight. She would die fighting if she had to. But she would not give up. Minji saw something in Kravik's eye too. Intelligence. Not just animal cunning, but real thinking. These creatures were not mindless monsters. They were people. Strange and scary people, but people nonetheless. The moment broke when another Vorax made a challenging sound. It was Thrax again. He was young and did not understand what was happening. He saw weakness in his leader. Kravik was hesitating. That was not the Vorax way. Thrax beat his chest and roared. He was challenging Kravik for leadership. This happened sometimes in Vorax society. If a leader showed weakness, another could challenge him. The winner became the new leader. But Thrax had chosen a bad time. Kravik turned toward Thrax and roared back. The sound shook the entire canyon. Birds flew out of the cliffs in panic. Rocks fell from the heights. The roar said, "I am still leader. I am still the strongest." Thrax immediately backed down. He lowered his head and made submissive sounds. He had made a mistake. Kravik was still too strong to challenge. While the Vorax were distracted, Minji saw her chance. There was a large rock near her feet. It was about the size of her head. She bent down quickly and picked it up. The rock was heavy. She needed both hands to hold it. But she lifted it anyway. She held it up so all the Vorax could see. When Kravik turned back around, he saw the human holding a weapon. It was a crude weapon. It was just a rock. But it was a weapon nonetheless. The Vorax recognized this. They used weapons too. Clubs and stones and sharp sticks. A creature that used weapons was more dangerous than a creature that did not. Minji did not know if she could actually throw the rock hard enough to hurt Kravik. Probably not, but that did not matter. What mattered was showing she could fight back. She had a weapon. She knew how to use it. The message was clear. Kravik made a sound that might have been respect. It was a low rumble from deep in his chest. The other Vorax heard it and went quiet. Their leader had made a decision. He reached out slowly with one massive hand. Minji tensed, ready to throw her rock, but Kravik did not try to hurt her. Instead, he touched the rock gently with one claw. Then he pulled his hand back. It was a gesture. It meant, "I see your weapon. I recognize your ability to fight." Minji lowered the rock slightly but did not put it down. She was learning how to communicate with these creatures. It was not about words. It was about actions and respect. Kravik turned to his pack and made several different sounds. The Vorax listened. Some made questioning sounds back. Kravik repeated his commands louder. This time, all of them listened. They began to back away from Minji. Not far, but enough to give her space. She was no longer surrounded. She could breathe easier now. One of the Vorax brought something from a cave. It was a container made of animal hide. He set it down near Minji and backed away. Minji approached carefully, still holding her rock. Inside the container was water. Clean, clear water. Minji was so thirsty. She had been crying and screaming for hours. Her throat was dry as sand. But she did not drink immediately. She looked at Kravik. Was this a trick? Was the water poisoned? Kravik made a gesture. He mimed drinking. Then he pointed at Minji. The meaning was clear. The water is safe. Drink. Minji set down her rock within easy reach. She picked up the container with shaking hands. She sniffed the water. It smelled clean. She took a tiny sip. It was good water. Cold and fresh. She drank deeply. The water was the best thing she had ever tasted. When she finished, she set down the container. She looked at Kravik and did something humans do naturally. She nodded her head. "Thank you." Kravik tilted his head. He did not understand the gesture, but he understood the meaning behind it. The human was grateful. Something impossible was happening in this canyon. Two species that should have been enemy and prey were finding a way to communicate. It was the first step towards something neither side could have imagined. The night on planet Carvo 7 was cold. 2 moons rose in the purple sky, casting strange shadows across the canyon. Minji sat against a rock wall, hugging her knees to her chest. She was shivering. Her clothes were torn from being dragged through the jungle. She had scratches all over her arms and legs. The Vorax did not sleep. Or if they did not all sleep at the same time. Some stood guard near the canyon entrance. Others sat in small groups, making low rumbling sounds to each other. They were always watching Minji. Kravik sat nearby. He was close enough to stop her if she tried to run, but far enough that she did not feel immediately threatened. His one good eye reflected the moonlight. He had not stopped watching her since the sun went down. Minji tried to think about anything except how scared she was. She thought about her father. Was he alive? She saw him get hit by one of the Vorax, but she did not see if he was dead. Maybe the other scientists helped him. Maybe they escaped. She touched her pocket where she kept the photograph. It was still there. The picture was bent and torn at the edges, but the faces were still clear. Her mother's smile. Her father's kind eyes. Minji started to cry again. "I want to go home," she whispered to the photograph. "I just want to go home." Kravik heard her crying. He made a soft rumbling sound. Not aggressive, almost concerned. Minji looked up at him through her tears. Could these monsters feel concern? Could they feel anything besides hunger and violence? The night grew colder. Minji could not stop shivering. She wrapped her arms around herself, but it did not help. Her teeth chattered. She had never been this cold before. Kravik stood up. Minji tensed, thinking he was going to hurt her now. But instead he walked to one of the caves. He came back carrying something. It was a large piece of animal fur. He dropped it near Minji, then backed away. Minji stared at the fur, then at Kravik, then back at the fur. It was a gift. He was giving her something to keep warm. With shaking hands, Minji picked up the fur. It was heavy and warm. It smelled bad, like all things the Vorax owned, but she did not care. She wrapped it around her shoulders. The warmth was immediate and wonderful. "Thank you," she said quietly. Kravik tilted his head at the strange sounds she made. He did not understand human language, but he understood gratitude. He made a low rumble and sat back down. Minji pulled the fur tighter around her body. Despite everything, despite being surrounded by monsters in a canyon full of bones, she felt a tiny bit safer. These creatures had not killed her yet. Kravik had given her water and warmth. Maybe, just maybe, she could survive until rescue came. If rescue came. She must have fallen asleep because when she opened her eyes again, the sky was getting lighter. The 2 moons were setting. The Vorax were moving around the canyon, starting their day. Minji sat up slowly. Her whole body was stiff and sore. Her stomach growled loudly. She had not eaten since breakfast yesterday. How long ago was that? It felt like forever. Kravik heard her stomach growl. He made a sound to another Vorax. That one went into a cave and came back with something. He threw it on the ground near Minji. It was meat. Raw red meat from some animal Minji did not recognize. Her stomach turned. She was hungry, but she was not that hungry. Humans could not eat raw meat like the Vorax did. It would make her sick. She shook her head. "I can't eat that." The Vorax did not understand. Kravik made an impatient sound. He pointed at the meat. Then at Minji. "Eat." Minji shook her head again. "I can't. I need it cooked. Fire. I need fire." She made gestures with her hands, trying to show flames. The Vorax looked confused. They did not use fire. They ate everything raw. Minji looked around the canyon. She needed to start a fire. Her uncle Junho taught her how once. She needed 3 things: fuel, heat, and air. There were dried plants and twigs scattered around the canyon. That could be fuel. For heat, she needed to make friction. She could rub sticks together. It would take a long time, but she could do it. She stood up, still wrapped in the fur. She started gathering dried grass and small sticks. The Vorax watched her with confusion. What was the small human doing? Kravik made a warning sound. Minji froze. She realized she was moving around the canyon freely. Maybe that was not allowed. Maybe they would attack if she wandered too far. She pointed at the plants. "I need these for fire, to cook the meat." Kravik did not understand her words, but he watched her actions. She was gathering plants, not trying to escape. He made a sound that meant continue. Minji collected an armful of dried materials. She brought them back to her spot near the wall. She arranged them in a small pile. Then she looked for good sticks to rub together. The Vorax gathered around to watch. They had never seen a human before. Every action Minji took was strange and interesting to them. She was tiny and weak, but she was doing something they did not understand. Minji found 2 sticks that might work. One was hard. One was softer. She began rubbing them together quickly. She had watched her uncle do this many times. But watching and doing were very different things. Her arms got tired quickly. Nothing happened. No smoke, no heat. Just friction and pain in her muscles. She kept trying. The Vorax continued watching. Some of them made sounds that might have been laughter. The human was doing something foolish. They found it entertaining. Minji's hands were getting blisters. Tears of frustration ran down her face. But she did not stop. She could not stop. If she stopped, she would have to eat raw meat or starve. Neither option was good. She thought about her mother. Salman never gave up on anything. When experiments failed, she tried again. When alien creatures attacked, she stayed calm and found solutions. Minji had her mother's blood. She had her mother's determination. "I can do this," Minji whispered. "I can do this." She rubbed the sticks faster. Her arms screamed in pain, but she ignored them. Faster, harder. "Come on." Then she smelled something. Smoke, just a tiny bit, but it was smoke. "Yes," she shouted. She rubbed even faster. The smoke got thicker. A tiny ember formed in the groove of the stick. Minji carefully placed the ember in her pile of dried grass. She bent down and blew on it gently. The ember grew. The grass started to smoke. Then, miraculously, a small flame appeared. The Vorax jumped back in surprise. Some of them roared in alarm. Fire was dangerous. Fire destroyed forests. Fire killed. But Minji had made fire. She quickly added small twigs to feed the flame. It grew bigger. She had done it. She had made fire with nothing but sticks and determination. Kravik stared at the fire in amazement. The small human had created something from nothing. She had a skill the Vorax did not have. She had knowledge they did not possess. Minji took a piece of the raw meat and held it over the flames using a stick. The meat sizzled and cooked. The smell was wonderful. Her stomach growled even louder. The Vorax smelled the cooking meat. They had never smelled anything like it. Some of them moved closer, curious. Others stayed back, afraid of the fire. When the meat was cooked enough, Minji blew on it to cool it. Then she took a bite. It was tough and gamey, but it was cooked and it was food. She ate hungrily. Kravik watched her eat. Then he looked at the fire. Then back at Minji. Something changed in his expression. This human was not just prey. She was not just something to eat. She was something else entirely. She was a creator. She was a thinker. She was resourceful. These were qualities the Vorax had lost over generations of war. They had forgotten how to create. They only knew how to destroy. But this tiny creature, this prey animal, had shown them something they had forgotten. After Minji finished eating, she kept the fire going. The warmth felt good. The Vorax slowly came closer. They were fascinated by the flames. Some of them reached out to touch it, then pulled back when it burned them. Minji almost smiled. They were like curious children. Dangerous, deadly children, but curious nonetheless. Kravik made a decision. He pointed at the fire, then at Minji. Then he made a questioning sound. Minji understood. He wanted to know how she did it. He wanted to learn. She picked up 2 new sticks. She showed him the rubbing motion. She did it slowly so he could see. Kravik watched intently. His one eye tracked every movement, then he tried. His huge hands could barely hold the tiny sticks. He rubbed them together clumsily. Nothing happened. He roared in frustration. Minji made a calming gesture. She showed him again. Slower this time. The Vorax had to see that learning took time. Even simple things took practice. Kravik tried again. His hands were not made for this kind of work. They were made for fighting and climbing. But he kept trying. Other Vorax watched. They saw their leader attempting to learn from the human. It was unthinkable. Leaders did not learn from prey. Leaders were already the strongest and smartest. But Kravik did not care what they thought. He had seen something important. This human had survived the night. She had made fire. She had cooked food. She had shown courage and intelligence. She deserved respect as the day went on. A strange routine developed. The Vorax went about their business. Some left to hunt. Others stayed to guard the canyon. Minji kept her fire burning. She cooked more meat when she was hungry. She drank water when she was thirsty, and she watched the Vorax. She was learning about them too. They had a hierarchy. Kravik was the leader, but others had ranks beneath him. They communicated with sounds and gestures. They were violent, but they followed rules. They were not chaos. They were order. By the time the sun began to set again, something had shifted in the canyon. 3 days had passed since Minji was captured. She was still in the canyon with the Vorax, but things had changed. The Vorax no longer treated her as prey. They watched her with curiosity instead of hunger. Minji had learned many things in those 3 days. She learned which Vorax were friendly and which ones were dangerous. She learned their daily routines. She learned some of their hand gestures and sounds. Not enough to truly communicate, but enough to understand basic meanings. The most important thing she learned was about Kravik. The giant scarred leader was not as simple as she first thought. He was smart, very smart, and he was teaching himself new things every day. Kravik had finally learned to make fire. It took him 2 full days of trying, but he did it. When the first spark caught and flames appeared, he roared in triumph. The other Vorax came running to see. Their leader had learned the human's magic. After that, other Vorax wanted to learn too. Minji spent hours teaching them. Most of them failed. Their hands were too big and clumsy. But a few succeeded. Soon there were multiple small fires burning around the canyon. The Vorax discovered that cooked meat tasted better than raw meat. They began cooking everything. They even tried cooking the strange fruits they gathered from the jungle. Some things tasted good cooked. Some things tasted terrible. But they were learning. Minji was learning too. She learned which plants the Vorax ate were safe for humans. She learned which water sources were clean. She learned how to climb the canyon walls using the same handholds the Vorax used. Her hands got tougher. Her muscles got stronger. She was adapting. It was what humans did best. On the morning of the fourth day, something happened that changed everything. Minji woke to the sound of alarm calls. The Vorax were roaring and beating their chests. Something was wrong. She sat up quickly and looked around. The Vorax were all facing the jungle beyond the canyon entrance. They formed a defensive line. Even Kravik looked worried. His fur stood on end. His one good eye was fixed on the tree line. Then Minji saw what they saw. Something was moving in the jungle. Something big. It crashed through the trees like a living tank. When it emerged into the clearing, Minji gasped. It was a predator like nothing she had ever seen. It stood on 6 legs, each one thick as a tree trunk. Its body was covered in armor plates that looked like black metal. Its head had 3 sets of jaws, all filled with teeth. It was easily twice the size of the largest Vorax. The creature roared. The sound was so loud that Minji covered her ears. The Vorax roared back, trying to scare it away. But the creature did not scare easily. It wanted food, and the Vorax canyon was full of food. The creature charged. The Vorax met it head-on. The battle was brutal and fast. The armored predator was strong, but the Vorax had numbers. They attacked from all sides. They used rocks and clubs. They used their claws and teeth. The predator swung its massive head, knocking Vorax aside like toys. 3 of them did not get up. Minji pressed herself against the canyon wall. She was frozen with fear. This was not her fight. These monsters could kill each other, as long as they left her alone. But then the predator broke through the Vorax line. It was heading straight for the caves, straight for where Minji was hiding. The Vorax tried to stop it, but it was too strong. It shook them off. Its 3 sets of jaws opened wide. It was going to grab Minji and eat her whole. Minji screamed. She could not help it. She was going to die. Then Kravik was there. He threw himself between Minji and the predator. The creature's jaws closed on his shoulder instead. Kravik roared in pain, but he did not let go. He grabbed the predator's head with both hands and pulled with all his strength. The other Vorax saw their leader defending the human. They attacked with renewed fury. They climbed on the predator's back. They stabbed at its eyes. They bit at its legs. Minji watched in shock. Kravik was protecting her. He was risking his life to save hers. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Finally, the predator had enough. It was bleeding from dozens of wounds. It could not win against this many Vorax. It turned and ran back into the jungle. The Vorax roared in victory. They had defended their territory. They had protected their pack. But Kravik was badly hurt. The predator's bite had torn deep into his shoulder. Blood poured from the wound. He collapsed to his knees, then fell forward onto his face. The other Vorax surrounded him, making worried sounds. They did not know what to do. The Vorax did not have medicine. They did not know how to treat wounds. They only knew how to fight and kill. But Minji knew about wounds. Her mother taught her basic first aid. It was required training for anyone going on research missions to alien planets. Minji ran to Kravik. The other Vorax backed away in surprise. What was the human doing? Minji examined the wound. It was bad, very bad. The teeth had punctured deep. The wound was bleeding too much. If it did not stop, Kravik would die from blood loss. She needed to stop the bleeding. She needed to clean the wound. She needed supplies she did not have. Think, Minji. Think like Mother would think. She looked around the canyon frantically. She needed something to press on the wound. Something clean. Her shirt was torn and dirty. The animal furs were dirty too. Then she remembered the water containers. They were made from animal bladders, but some of them were made from plant fibers. Plant fibers could be clean if they were dried. She ran to the storage area and grabbed several dried plant fiber containers. She tore them apart into strips. It was not perfect, but it would work. She ran back to Kravik. She pressed the plant fibers against the wound as hard as she could. Her hands were immediately covered in blood. Kravik's blood was red, just like human blood. For some reason, that surprised her. "Hold on," she told him. "Just hold on." Kravik's one eye looked at her. There was pain in that eye, but also surprise. The human was helping him. The tiny creature he had almost killed was now trying to save his life. Minji pressed harder on the wound. The bleeding was slowing, but not stopping. She needed something to tie the bandage in place. She looked at her torn clothing. Her shirt was ruined anyway. She tore off a long strip from the bottom of her shirt. She wrapped it around Kravik's massive shoulder, tying the plant fiber bandages in place. She tied it as tight as she could. The other Vorax watched in silence. They had never seen anything like this. Healing, medicine, compassion for the wounded. These were things they had forgotten in their long years of war. Minji stepped back. Her hands were shaking. She was covered in blood, but the bandage was holding. The bleeding had slowed to a trickle. "You need to rest," she told Kravik. "Don't move around. The wound needs time to close." Kravik did not understand her words, but he understood her actions. She had saved him. This small, weak creature had saved his life. He reached out with his good hand and gently touched Minji's head. It was a gesture of gratitude, of respect. Minji felt tears running down her face. She did not know why she was crying. Maybe it was the stress. Maybe it was the fear. Maybe it was because something beautiful had happened in this canyon of death. Two different species had just saved each other's lives. The other Vorax began making sounds. They were talking among themselves. They looked at Minji differently now. She was not a prisoner anymore. She was not prey. She was not even just a curiosity. She was pack. Over the next few days, everything changed. The Vorax treated Minji like one of them. They brought her the best food. They made sure her fire never went out. They showed her the secret paths through the canyon. Kravik's wound healed slowly. Minji changed his bandages every day. She cleaned the wound with boiled water. She checked for signs of infection. Her mother would have been proud. Kravik learned to trust Minji completely. When she worked on his wound, he stayed perfectly still. He knew she was helping him. He knew she was a healer. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Minji tried to teach Kravik her language. She pointed at herself. "Minji," Kravik tilted his head. He made a sound. It was close to Minji, but deeper and rougher. Minji smiled. "Yes, Minji." Kravik pointed at himself. He made a deep rumbling sound. "Kravik, Kravik," Minji repeated. "Your name is Kravik." Kravik made a pleased sound. They had just shared names. In both human and Vorax culture, sharing names was important. It meant friendship. It meant trust, but their peace did not last long. On the 7th day, Minji heard a sound that made her heart jump. It came from above the canyon. A distant humming. A mechanical sound. Starships. Rescue had finally come. Minji ran to the center of the canyon and looked up. She saw them. 3 human ships flying in formation. They were searching the area. "Looking for survivors, here," she screamed. "I'm here." The Vorax heard her screaming and came running. They saw the ships and immediately went into defensive positions. They had fought spaceship crews before. Those fights usually ended in violence. One of the ships spotted the canyon and began descending. Minji waved her arms frantically. The ship came lower. A loudspeaker crackled to life. "Survivor spotted. Appears to be a child. Surrounded by hostile creatures. Prepare for armed extraction, armed extraction." That meant the rescue team would shoot the Vorax to save her. "No," Minji screamed. "Don't shoot! They're friends." But the ship was too far away. They could not hear her. She saw weapons extending from the hull. They were going to kill the Vorax. Kravik saw the weapons too. He roared a command. The Vorax prepared to fight. The news spread across human space like wildfire. A little girl survived 7 days with the Vorax, the most dangerous predators in known space. The same creatures that destroyed colonies and killed thousands of humans and aliens alike. And she did not just survive. She made friends with them. At first, nobody believed it. The news reporters thought it was a mistake. Military officials thought it was enemy propaganda. Even other scientists doubted the story. But then the videos came out. Footage from the rescue ship's cameras. It showed Minji standing between the Vorax and the rescue team. It showed her touching Kravik's hand with trust and affection. It showed the Vorax protecting her instead of eating her. The galaxy watched those videos over and over. They could not believe what they were seeing. Within a month, the story was everywhere. Minji's face was on every news station. Her story was translated into hundreds of languages. Humans, aliens, everyone wanted to know about the little girl and the monsters, but Minji did not think of them as monsters anymore. And she made sure everyone knew it. The first scientist to arrive at Carvo 7 was Dr. Hyun-soo. He was an expert in xenobiology and animal behavior. He came with a full research team and enough military protection to fight a small war. But they did not need to fight. Minji introduced them to Kravik. She showed them how to approach the Vorax without triggering their hunting instincts. She showed them the fire-making. She showed them the cooked food. She showed them the bandages she used on Kravik's wound. Dr. Hyun-soo was amazed. "This is incredible," he said. "You have established basic communication protocols with a species we thought was incapable of anything except violence." "They were never incapable," Minji said. "They just forgot how. We can help them remember." Dr. Hyun-soo set up a research station in the canyon. More scientists arrived. They brought medical supplies, food, tools, and most importantly, translator technology. The translator devices were experimental. They analyzed sounds, gestures, and body language. Then they converted those signals into understandable speech. The technology had been used with some success on other alien species. The question was, would it work on the Vorax? Kravik was the first to try it. They fitted a translator collar around his thick neck. It took 3 people to lift it into place. Kravik growled uncomfortably, but Minji touched his hand and made calming sounds. He trusted her. Dr. Hyun-soo activated the translator. "Can you understand me?" he asked. Kravik tilted his head. He made a rumbling sound. The translator processed it. A mechanical voice spoke, strange sounds. "Not pack language. It works," Dr. Hyun-soo shouted. "It actually works." Over the next few weeks, they calibrated the translator. Kravik learned to use it better. He learned that different sounds from the humans meant different things. He learned human words and he learned to speak them. "Minji," Kravik said one day. The translator made his voice sound less scary. "Minji is pack. Minji is friend." Minji was in tears. "Yes, Kravik. I am your friend." "Friend," Kravik repeated. "Good word. We were enemies. Now we are friends." More Vorax received translators. They were all eager to learn. It turned out the Vorax had been desperate to communicate with other species for generations. They had so many questions, so many things they wanted to say. One of the younger Vorax, whose name translated to Swift Runner, asked the question they all wanted answered. "Why did humans help us?" "We took your child. We could have killed her. Why help us?" Dr. Hyun-soo looked at Minji. She stepped forward. "Because Kravik protected me when he could have eaten me. Because you gave me water when I was thirsty. Because you gave me warmth when I was cold. You are not evil. You are just afraid and alone." Kravik made a sound of sadness. "Yes, Vorax have been alone for many generations. We forgot how to be anything except warriors. We forgot how to have friends." "Then we will teach you," Minji said, "just like you taught me how to survive." Commander Yunji arrived 2 months later. She was in charge of human military operations in this sector. She came with orders to assess whether the Vorax were a threat to human colonies. She watched Minji teaching young Vorax how to read. She watched Kravik learning about agriculture from Dr. Hyun-soo. She watched Vorax children playing games with human children who came with the research teams. "I have seen enough," Commander Yunji said. "The Vorax are not a threat. They are an opportunity." "An opportunity for what?" Dr. Hyun-soo asked. "For peace," Yunji said. "Real peace. The Vorax have been warriors for hire for centuries. Every conflict in the galaxy has Vorax soldiers on one side or both. But what if they did not have to fight anymore? What if they could build instead?" The proposal was simple but radical. Human governments would sponsor Vorax rehabilitation programs. They would teach Vorax farming, construction, medicine, and art. Everything they had forgotten in their generations of war. In exchange, the Vorax would share their knowledge of combat, survival, and the dozens of planets they had visited. They would serve as security forces for human colonies, but not as mindless killers, as trained professionals who understood when to fight and when to make peace. Kravik listened to the proposal through his translator. He discussed it with his pack for 3 days. Finally, he gave his answer. "Vorax accept. We are tired of war. We want to build. We want to create. We want to be more than killers." The first Vorax human exchange program began on Carvo 7. Young Vorax learned to read and write. They learned mathematics and science. They learned about art and music. In return, human soldiers learned Vorax combat techniques. They learned how to survive in hostile environments. They learned the old Vorax traditions that even the Vorax had half forgotten. Minji was at the center of it all. She was only 8 years old, but she had become a symbol of hope, a symbol of what was possible when different species chose understanding over fear. 1 year after her capture, Minji stood on a stage in front of thousands of humans and Vorax. She was at the grand opening of the first joint human-Vorax settlement on planet Novaterra. Kravik stood beside her, wearing ceremonial clothes that mixed human and Vorax traditions. 1 year ago, I was taken from my camp, Minji said into the microphone. I thought I was going to die. I thought the Vorax were monsters. She paused and looked at Kravik. He nodded encouragingly. But I learned something important. There are no monsters. There are only people who are afraid. People who are alone. People who have forgotten how to be anything else. She turned to face the crowd. Humans used to be like that too. Before we went to space, we fought each other all the time. We had terrible wars. We killed millions of our own people. But we learned to be better. We learned to work together. The Vorax can learn too. They already are learning. And we can learn from them. They can teach us to be strong. To never give up. To protect what matters. Kravik stepped forward. His translator voice boomed across the crowd. Small humans saved my life. Not with weapons. With kindness. With knowledge. With courage. He placed his massive hand on Minji's shoulder. Minji showed Vorax what we forgot. That strength is not just claws and teeth. Strength is standing tall when fear says run. Strength is helping others when hate says hurt. Strength is choosing to build when destruction is easier. The crowd erupted in cheers. Humans and Vorax together, celebrating something that should have been impossible. Minji wrote a book about her experience. It was called 7 Days with Giants. The book became required reading in schools across human space. Children learned about her story. They learned that being brave did not mean not being scared. Being brave meant doing the right thing even when you were terrified. The book was also translated into Vorax language. Young Vorax read about Kravik's decision to protect a human child instead of killing her. They learned that their species could be more than warriors. They could be protectors. They could be friends. 3 years after the first contact, Vorax warriors served alongside human soldiers on dozens of planets. But they were different from the Vorax of the past. They fought only when necessary. They protected civilians. They followed rules of engagement. They understood the difference between a warrior and a killer. Kravik became the first Vorax ambassador to the Galactic Council. When he walked into the council chambers wearing his translator and his ceremonial robes, the entire galaxy watched. I speak for my people, Kravik said. We were lost. We were alone. We were killers. But humans showed us another way. They showed us that change is possible. That redemption is possible. He looked directly into the main camera. Billions of beings across the galaxy watched. To all species who think they cannot change, to all people who think they are trapped by their nature, I say this, Vorax thought the same thing. We thought violence was all we had. We were wrong. If Vorax can change, anyone can change. The council voted unanimously. The Vorax were granted full membership in the Galactic Alliance. They were no longer outsiders. They were no longer just mercenaries. They were citizens. Minji attended the ceremony. She was 11 years old now. Taller, stronger, braver. Her father Taeyang sat beside her, his arm healed, his pride in his daughter endless. Your mother would have been so proud, he whispered to her. Minji touched the photograph in her pocket. She carried it everywhere. Her mother's face. Her father's young eyes. They were her strength when she needed it most. I know, Minji said. She taught me to never give up.